this is just a very unusual time, very unique and unprecedented time, if you will. And I think it is the only time in the history of my life that anything has ever happened like this. I don't know if others on this call would say the same because we're varying ages, but we're in a crisis on some level. And then yet life can feel very normal. I went to the grocery store. Will and I and Garrett flew in today. I had joy yesterday. We had joy because our son got married. And so the wedding was a little rushed for immigration purposes. His wife is from Costa Rica, and they had to take some action there. So it was a kind of a last minute wedding. But we were in California, and we came home today, and life has been really normal in some ways. And yet when I went to the grocery store to prepare to go into isolation here, since we just traveled in, life is not normal in a grocery store right now. And I think many of you know that, right? To see the shelves wiped out, and yet to practice moving through that grocery store in a way that was calm, with ease, with remembrance of the Holy One, remembrance of this particular time that we're in, and trying to love my neighbor. There were only 3 little boxes of tofu, and they were shoved way in the back of the refrigerated section. And I happened to spot it, and I was looking for tofu, right? Because it's my main staple, being vegan. And so I saw it, and I went over there, and I dug way down in, and I pulled the tofu forward, and there was another woman standing there. And so I asked her if she was looking for the same, and she was, so we shared it. And we each took one and left one for someone else. So it just provides these opportunities to be in community. At the same time, knowing that we're going to be having, some of us and many of us, and we'll see where it all unfolds, many of us are going to have to be more isolated. And what's that mean? And how do we move through this period of isolation? Or I don't like the word social distancing. I'm trying to come up with another word for what we're going through, because we're social beings, aren't we? We're social in our interactions, and we're being social right now. And yet we can't have that face-to-face, that human touch in the same way, and that's what's missing. And that's an essential part of us being human together. It's an essential part of our beingness and what brings joy and aliveness. And so as we move through this time and we're meeting each other online like this, which is a joy, we also need to recognize there's a loss from that inability to be together in the flesh, and be together in our community on Monday nights, or on Sunday mornings, or on Wednesdays for the Quest, or on Tuesday and Thursday for the Course in Miracles. And so there's this adjustment, and it's just a strange paradox as I sat with this of being excited to see you all this evening, and being excited with the technology that we can still meet, and also a sadness that we can't be in community in the normal ways, and we're having to learn how to be in community in different ways. And so this also provides a real opportunity for us to deepen our practices in many ways. And I've been saying this for the last few years as we've moved through the difficult times that we've faced. And this is one of the more difficult, probably maybe the most difficult in some ways, as a human family that we've really faced. For me, it's what we've been preparing for. For me, having a meditation practice where I've practiced years and years and years on it, it's what I've been practicing for, is to know how to move into a place of quiet. a place of be still and know that I am God, a place to know that I can rest there and have a calm, responsive place rather than reactive place to what's happening. And to know that no matter what happens in my life or your life, we are healthy, we are well, we are held, we are calm, we are peaceful, we are all those things. And when fear or uncertainty arises in me, then I go into my practice and I go back into that place and find those tools that I've been working with all these years that help support me to stay in that calm place. And one thing that's important too is to reach out to each other when things get a little challenging, or maybe some of those feelings come up. And so I'm going to be in isolation with Will and Garrett because we all traveled in, and there's a beauty there because we live together, we can be together, and there's community. But some of you may be living alone, and you're still going out perhaps, but you're watching when you go out, and it may be a different experience to not be able to go socialize in the same way. So it's really important that we as a community reach out to each other. And I really can't emphasize that enough. We're going to be doing it on Monday nights, and Will and I mentioned yesterday that we're going to have a meditation every morning starting next week that we're going to offer. So there will be opportunities for us to be like this. And if you start feeling like you need some extra support, then let us know, and we'll make sure that, you know, we're a big community. We'll make sure that we can support each other during this time. And it's just really important that we all are here for each other. It's a great opportunity to deepen. It's a great joy to be with you all and be here right now and know. Isn't it amazing that we can meet like this? I mean, we were talking just a few minutes ago with Garrett. What were we talking? Oh, we were talking about memos. You remember, how many of you remember being in an office and having memos that you'd send, and they were a memo pad, and you had to write who it was to, who it was from, and then your little comments. And Garrett said, you had to handwrite it? That was his question. Sorry, Garrett, I'm putting you on the spot. But it, you know, that's how we did it. And if this had happened 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, we would have been in a totally different situation. We would have just had to close the doors and say, bye, see you later. See you when we get on the other side of this kind of thing. And maybe pick up the phone and dial it in or ring each other up. And we had that form of communication. But it's just so beautiful. It's so amazing that we can be here tonight together. So I welcome all of us here. And we're going to continue on our Monday nights together like this. And we're going to have other offerings coming up that we will continue. And if you're on a learning curve with Zoom, by the time we're a few weeks into this, you're not going to be on a learning curve anymore. You're going to know this technology really, really well. So really happy that we're all here together. And I look forward to hearing what we share in our groups tonight and deepening into practice together.
And I noticed that Jennifer just joined us, it looks like. Hello, Jennifer, and thank you for all of the help you've given to put together all of this online work that we're doing. And also, I want to give a special welcome to Liam and Nathaniel, who are our youngest members. Here they are. And I really appreciate your coming to this because I was reflecting also last week, a couple weeks ago when we did this, what impact this would have had on me if I had experienced something like this at your age. So I just want to say that everything that we do in this course is also hopefully something that's very readily understandable by everyone. And so I just want a special welcome to our two youngest members of the course and community. So just a couple more reflections, and then we're going to move into meditation, and then I'm going to speak a bit. As we were talking on Sunday, this, what we're calling the coronavirus, has all of its challenges, there's no doubt, and has its crisis elements. But the other thing it's demonstrating is not only what we were saying on Sunday, our unity, sort of physiologically and biologically as a human family, as well as spiritually, as I was suggesting. It's actually reminding us, we already knew that, or we should know that, especially as members of the unity community, but it's really making that very self-evident. And we'll be working with that over the next month as we're all sort of, to various degrees, quarantined in our homes. But what I wanted to say was it has also demonstrated within a matter of a few, a week and a half to 2 weeks, how the entire world can organize and mobilize around a shared agenda. And I've just been reflecting on how remarkable that is, that we have taken this concerted action across the globe in all these different ways, really quite dramatic and drastic, shutting down many aspects of our normal social organization and function, all in service, in this case, of minimizing the spread of this virus. But it seems like there's a profound global learning for the human family here. I mean, what if we also took this same concerted action in the service, for example, of love of God and love of neighbor as oneself? I mean, implementing some of the key spiritual teachings that down through the ages we have been guided by the great spiritual teachers of humanity. It's just an interesting reflection. Or even if we were to say, what if we took this same concerted global action in relation to some of the larger systemic crises like climate change or environmental pollution or human rights issues? How quickly might we as a human family, if we really prioritized these key spiritual values, might transform our current social structures and experience of the human family with its malaise and things into something more resembling what is referred to as the kingdom of God on earth. So it's just something to think about and muse upon. And I think as we move toward through this month and these months to really feel and listen in for this deeper lesson from this period, from this unique and unprecedented period, and listen for ways that we might take this forward after this crisis passes into bonding together as a human family around shared commitments and really committing to move forward with those. It could be really quite remarkable. Go ahead.
So we were going to sit for a few more minutes. So if we were meeting in person, we would probably sit for 30 minutes. That would be the norm of sitting for about 30 minutes in total silence. But since we aren't meeting in person and you're there on your own and we're here on our own, then we thought that we'd break our meditations, separate it into 2 parts. So we're going to sit for 10 to 15 minutes and then listen to a sharing from Will, and then we'll sit again. Did you have more to say?
No, but I would like to read, to kind of open this sitting, and in a certain sense, to open this next section of the course. By the way, just one thought, one sort of guideline about the course. We are going to be weaving in and out over these weeks science and spirituality. Essentially, last couple of weeks ago, we really began our inquiry into quantum physics. We will continue with that, particularly next week, and then different aspects of science, and then spiritual and mystical practice will be all woven together. It's really important for us to take that approach because, first of all, we are here in the service of spiritual transformation. That is our fundamental purpose here in this course and in the Unity community, is to actually walk this path of divine love, if you will, and divine service, which all of the great religious traditions point to and espouse and uphold. And so we'll be at times really focusing more on the spiritual and mystical dimensions, and other times more on the scientific and kind of philosophical dimensions, and really looking for the ways in which they unite into a unified vision of the world and of reality and of our practice. But I wanted to start with this poem. These are stanzas. This comes from one of the great Carmelite mystics, St. John of the Cross. And I love it because he's really speaking about entering into the unknown and moving to a place of transcending all knowledge. And in a certain sense, I'm struck, I've always loved these stanzas. So and that's part of what we're here to do, is to share what we love and share the teachings and insights and practices that we love. But I've always loved this particular little set of, they're called stanzas, but it's kind of a meditation. But it's about entering into the unknown. Now, in this case, he's speaking in terms of the mystical relationship with God, entering into that unknown. But I think it applies also at this moment in our collective history. We are entering into the unknown in a certain sense, because we are at a kind of unprecedented moment. And there's a gift in this which we can't yet see. And if we can move into it with that mutual awareness and kind of presence, and then bring to it the depths of our consciousness, I think that we can really find this next several weeks and months to be a time of a deep inner bonding. That's really our intention and our prayer for this time, and to work with our community in this way. And we have the benefit of this technology, and that's great. And we also need to really work with the inner reality of consciousness, and not merely the technological outer capacity to see each other and talk in this way. So I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes gently, and I'll read this set of stanzas from St. John of the Cross. And then after I'm finished reading, we will just move into our first silent meditation period. So just gently getting comfortable, gently closing your eyes. And let's begin with a couple of deep breaths. Really centering yourself in the breath, feeling the nourishment of the breath, and feeling yourself relaxing on the exhale. Feeling your awareness unhooking from thought, descending into your heart area. And again, another deep breath. And exhaling. And the third. And exhaling. And now allowing your awareness to focus in the heart area. And as you listen to these words, not trying to figure them out, but trying to enter into their deeper meaning. Or not even trying, but just allowing some deeper presence that may be there to open. I entered into unknowing, yet when I saw myself there, without knowing where I was, I understood great things. I will not say what I felt, for I remained in unknowing, transcending all knowledge. That perfect knowledge was of peace and holiness, held at no remove in profound solitude. It is something so secret that I was left stammering, transcending all knowledge. I was so overwhelmed, so absorbed and withdrawn, that my senses were left deprived of all their sensing, and my spirit was given an understanding while not understanding, transcending all knowledge. Those who truly arrive there, cut free from themselves, all that they have known before now seems worthless, and their knowledge so soars that they are left in unknowing, transcending all knowledge. The higher we ascend, the less we understand, because the cloud is dark which lit up the night. Whoever knows this remains always in unknowing, transcending all knowledge. This knowledge in unknowing is so overwhelming that the wise disputing it can never overthrow it. For their knowledge does not reach to the understanding of not understanding, transcending all knowledge. And this supreme knowledge that does not reach to the understanding of not understanding, this supreme knowledge is so exalted that no power of human learning can grasp it. Those who master themselves will, with knowledge and unknowing, always be transcending. And if you should want to hear, this highest knowledge lies in the loftiest sense of the essence of God. This is a work of God's mercy and mystery. To leave one without understanding, transcending all knowledge. So let's just now move into the silence, entering into this unknowing. And sitting in this infinite inner stillness of the heart. So thank you and welcome back. We will be working with silence a lot in the next month and in this course and also in our daily meditation. Charles Fillmore emphasizes the importance of it, and we'll be going through that in some of the guidelines and instructions for our silent meditation daily practice starting on Monday, next Monday. And we are designing and putting the pieces of that together this week, just the structure of that. For now, I just want to thank you all and for being here and for entering into this period of unknown together in this course and in this time. One thing that we'll be talking about later is a term called quantum entanglement. I think we mentioned it last week, which is a way of saying that all things are fundamentally interconnected with one another. I would almost rather have called it quantum communion, because entanglement sounds a little like, you're all strapped down with all kinds of ropes and barbs, and you're sort of, everything is confusing and chaotically interconnected. It almost carries an implicit sense that it would be better if things were clear and untangled. When you have something that's in a tangle, we kind of like to untangle it and get clear and get everything separated from everything else, so it's all distinct and clear and orderly and organized. But in fact, the nature of consciousness is that we are all connected. So we could think of it as quantum communion, or even perhaps holographic communion, if you will, or fractal communion, because part of the structure of consciousness, as I love to emphasize, as you probably know by now, is this fractal nature of consciousness. And I'm not going to go into that tonight, except to point out one manifestation of it, an outer manifestation of it, which is that the computer that you're looking at right now, it's the computers that are enabling us to see each other and hear each other speak outwardly. And looking into your screen, your computer contains within its memory banks, the RAM, and on the screen, the entire community that's present right now. So all of us are present inside your computer. You can see all of our faces there, all neatly included in your one computer sitting in front of you. And that's true for each of our computers sitting in front of each of us. So each of our computers contains this whole community in a literal sense in its storage kind of files and hardware. Well, I just want to really invite us to consider that the same is true of our consciousness, that each of our hearts contains this entire community. And that's really what we'll be working with over these next weeks and during this time, that the heart really does contain the infinite, and in particular, this nature of the structure of the invisible consciousness is that our heart contains this whole community. And so as I speak in my words, and then in a little bit, you will all be speaking with each other, but your hearts also hold the fullness of the community in the same way that your computer holds it in a sort of outward techie form, if you will. Okay, so what I want to do now is go to share just a few slides with you. And let's see, this may get funny looking for a minute. So I'm going to, share some slides. Here we go. So what I want to speak to briefly is really, in a sense, the practice, if you will, of mysticism across the traditions, across the spiritual traditions. And in particular, I want to outline some of the common features of the practice of mysticism in the theistic religions. Theistic meaning that there is a belief in some being, which is often called God. And there are parallels to this in the non-theistic traditions, but in the practice that I want to focus on and the kind of universality of it is found in these different traditions. For more detail on this, you can look in the book Belonging to God. I think it's chapter 5. In that book, I look at essentially what I call the universal path of divine love across the theistic religions. And this particular chapter focuses on the practice of divine love, or practice of mysticism. Now, what is mysticism? And we'll be going into that in more depth later, but you can think of it as a synonym for both the practice and the ontological reality of union with God, of actually becoming the human being in the depths of our consciousness, becoming at one with the infinite that created the universe, the cosmos. So it's a very remarkable thing when you think about it, that tiny little you can become one with the very source of the entire universe and beyond. And the practice is similar to what John of the Cross just described. It is across the mystics, across all of the traditions, there is this common practice of going inward, going into the inner mystery of one's own being, of one's own self, going beyond the known into this unknown, entering into the unknowing that we just heard John of the Cross speak about, and becoming absorbed in this inner interior space. And that's what we'll be working with as a part of this course, throughout the course, in the practice of meditation and prayer. What I want to just outline this evening are the ways, certain universal qualities, and I've outlined here in Christianity and Sufism and in Hinduism, the particular sources that I drew on for this. And if you don't know these sources, don't worry about it. I just want you to see that there are these different, particular contemplative traditions and mystics across these three theistic traditions that have come to, there are certain principles of this practice in common. And again, for more detail, you can find this in the book. Some of you may be familiar with Brother Lawrence, The Practice of the Presence of God, which is the name of one of his books. I think Cynthia was speaking about him in a recent course. Sometimes I forget whether we're talking about the course or something we brought in.
It was in a Sunday service.
In a Sunday service. Highly recommend that book sometime for really working with the practice of the presence of God. And then, of course, the great Carmelite mystics, Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, and the Suspice prayer of the Jesuits. So I'm not going to go into these details right now because I want to kind of keep us moving forward. But I just want you to see that also with the great Sufi Saint Rabia, the female saint, I think 8th century or 9th century, and then in the Bhagavad Gita, and in particular in this branch of Vaishnavite Hinduism, which means Krishna worship, called Sri Vaishnavite Hinduism. So anyway, across all of these traditions, there are these similar key elements of the actual practice. And since we want to be focusing on practice also in this course, I wanted to just outline those. And so what are they? And here they are. In the Hindu tradition, it's called, there's this term prapati. And prapati means the practice of surrender in a certain sense. And a prapana is a person who surrenders. You find the exact same thing in Islam. They have the very word Islam means surrender or submission to God. And Muslim is the person who does that surrender. So in any case, but this comes from, so this particular articulation comes from the Sri Vaishnavite Hindu tradition, but it's, as I show in the book, these five are very kind of universal. So now, and I put G-D because, as you know, I think sometimes God, we all understand that God, the concept God, the word God, and the intellectual label of the term God are all basically a symbol of the actual mystery represented by God. In other words, there is a spiritual ultimate mystery to which we each have direct access and to which we give a label or a name. And so sometimes you'll see God spelled this way. I'm sure you've seen it before. Without the O, just reminding us that it's not really a word. It's an essence that is beyond all words and all concepts. And in the theistic traditions, there's this first principle of doing God's will. So this mystery, this supreme being and essence to which we can connect and have our own direct and personal relationship, this is very important. And during this next several weeks when we are all in our homes, however we practice, however you practice, we strongly recommend really using this time as almost a personal retreat that God has basically cloistered us in our own homes. And we could just hang out and watch videos and, do our thing and do our work online as best we can. And we'll be doing some of that, certainly, and connect with each other. That's a very important time to connect with each other. But it's a very remarkable and unique opportunity for us to go inward and really intend and make a practice of really connecting with this invisible, infinite, supreme mystery and source that we call God. So, and that source has a will, which if we seek, ask, and knock, will be revealed. This is really important. This is the reason for prayer and meditation, is to silence our chatter, our inner chatter, and our mental machinations enough to where we can actually hear and feel this sense of God's will. And we all have a connection to it, and we all feel it. And often we first feel it in the connection of conscience, like when you're going to do something that you know you shouldn't, and you feel that little voice inwardly saying, I don't think so, shouldn't do that. But it doesn't compel. We can do it anyway. And we all do it, sometimes daily, where we hear that little voice and we sort of say, oh no, I'm going forward with this. And often we find, oh, actually that voice was pretty right on, spot on. We see what happened as a result. So there's a certain sense of attuning ourselves to those subtle hints of the heart. And they are often given as hints. And that will then connect us with this invisible thread to this deeper mystery. And we cultivate, welcome, and open to that connection. That's very important. And then we'll find that it has a will. It has an intelligence and a will, and it will guide us. And sometimes it will guide us in ways we never expected. And we'll be giving examples of that from our own lives. And that is the beauty of connecting to the will of this larger mystery, and the profundity of the fact that that will, that divine will, attends to each one of us individually. It's very, very remarkable. And in the process of then committing and aligning ourselves to be implementing the will of this invisible inner beloved companion, which we can't see, touch, hear, taste, or feel, yet, well, we do feel the presence of, and we can directly relate to. The second step here is to refrain from actions that go against that will, that somehow, now here, the phraseology used here is, actions that displease God, and that can sound a little, punishing potentially and admonishing. And it's not meant that way, at least in my understanding. The whole term sin, as you know, means missing the mark. It doesn't mean you're a bad person and you've committed some horrific thing, but it means you've somehow missed the mark. That when we attune ourselves to this inner mystery and align ourselves with it, it will guide us not only in the larger, major decisions of our lives, but in the intimate details. And we sensitize ourselves to that inner communion. And then we'll feel that temptation at times to go against things. We want to do this instead of what that inner small voice, that inner nudging of the heart is indicating. And the practice is to refrain from superseding, from overstepping its will, from basically clamoring and say, no, I'm going to do this. And it's a practice because we all sort of betray that subtle inner voice at times. And it's okay. We're not going into any judgment around it. But what we do want to do is be mindful of it. We want to notice it. And we want to notice the consequences of when we step, in a certain sense, in contrary to what we're feeling in the depths of the heart. And over time, what we'll find if we do that is if we refrain from those actions, something else will emerge. We maybe wanted to do something else, but then something we never expected, more beautiful and more important, emerges. And if we listen to that, we actually are living in a deeper harmony and alignment with God and with reality. And then the third one here is to maintain absolute faith in God. And this is something that is not so simple. It takes time to cultivate. As Jesus says, the faith that can move mountains, and he's speaking literally. There's a level of faith that most of us don't have, but that could actually move mountains, that can rearrange reality if our conviction and connection to the source is strong enough. So it's really important to recognize that faith has a depth and a profundity. We'll be going into that in more depth over the next few weeks. But to recognize that faith starts from recognizing the reality of this mystery. There is this supreme presence or mystery to which we can connect inwardly, and that is the source of our life, our existence, and of the universe. So we can start our faith from there. I mean, we didn't create ourselves. So we were brought here for a reason. And whatever it is that brought us here and gave us this mystery of and great gift of life, we have faith in that, in God, in him, her, however we like to think of God. And as we develop that faith, we deepen into this inner life that aligns us with that will of God, and then brings the various gifts. And the gifts come unbidden in many mysterious ways, and we'll explore those as well. And then the fourth one here is to place our total trust in God and in God's protection. And this means not only trusting that kind of God knows what's going on, but and so we can trust God in that way, but to entrust ourselves to God, to basically give our protection over to God. And this is very important at this time with the coronavirus. And even if we contract the coronavirus, to continue to entrust ourselves to God and trust that God holds our highest. And that as we give ourselves to this deep practice and surrender, that our highest destiny unfolds. And that is really the conviction of the great mystics. And also what happens then is that we begin to come to this place with that alignment of doing what we call God's will, refraining from those actions that go against that inner impulse of the heart, maintaining that faith and placing our total trust. We then come to the place where we can surrender or submit or really consent, if you will, to God completely, where we really offer ourselves to this supreme mystery, and we become then instruments for God's will and God's love in life and on this plane, on the earthly plane. So surrender also has deeper levels of meaning. The term surrender is always a bit unfortunate in English because it sounds like some kind of defeat and humiliation. And it's not that. It's not what's intended, but it's really a self-giving, self-offering, and really relinquishing our ideas about who we are and what we should do, and allowing that inner mystery of God to be the leader in every aspect of our lives. So this is a very brief summary. And finally, that sometimes there's a sixth one, which is to show humility in the face of God. And I think really there's a lot there, and we'll talk about that at more length. But the basic idea is to recognize that there is this larger supreme mystery of the life source itself that created the cosmos, that created all of us, that is responsible for our existence and our destiny. And it's glorious, it's profound, and it's beyond us. And so naturally, as we recognize that majesty and glory of the divine, if you will, then this humility emerges naturally. And it deepens. Now, I just want to say briefly that all of this somewhat challenges the ways that we are taught in the West. For example, even the idea that John of the Cross spoke of, where he says, I entered into unknowing and went to a place and there understood things that are beyond what can be understood. So in scientific discourse and scientific enterprise, we generally start with the sense of reality can be understood and grasped. And as we do our experiments, we can figure it all out. And we learn through science in particular, but also philosophy, to trust the mind and trust the knowledge of the mind and the deeper discernments of the mental conceptual understanding of life. Whereas in the spiritual quest, we embrace this larger mystery. We trust and we learn to trust something unknown and invisible. And that trust is a little bit vulnerable precisely because it's unknown and invisible. And this is what we're invited into. So there is a very different quality to the spiritual seeking than there is to the scientific investigation. And I think it's important as we move through this course to keep that distinction in mind and to really open to both. We do not want to close ourselves to the insights and the depth and the capacity of mental reasoning and conceptual ways of knowing and understanding on the one hand, and the great gifts of scientific revelation, even we could call it, in its own way, on the one hand. And on the other hand, there is a deep truth and profundity to the spiritual reality that is way beyond what our contemporary science understands. Although, as we'll be seeing later in this course, science itself is beginning to get more serious about opening to that mystery, and it's actually quite exciting. So we'll be looking at that. Quantum physics is one aspect of that, but there are many others. Third point, and this is really important, the intuition, which is the subjective knowing that transcends reason, is typically in our Western scientific and philosophical training regarded as not really real or practical because it's merely subjective. It's seen as kind of unreliable and guesswork. And we really want to invite each of you, and in this course and in the spiritual journey, to develop a whole different relationship to intuition, where intuition becomes an inner guiding light. It becomes a source. What does intuition mean? It means the inner tutor, the inner teacher. And there is an inner teacher in each of us that will show us the way and will actually teach us. That the path itself will show us and teach us the path. And that this is something we can learn to rely on and have faith in and surrender to completely. Now, the other objection sometimes to the whole spiritual path is that, that is too simple, too easy, must not be true or real. If it's not understood with, the Schrödinger equation and Einstein's relativity theory, that's reality, because that is the deep penetration into the deep secrets of reality. And you can only understand them by understanding quantum physics and relativity theory and the depth of those meaning of those equations. And sorry, folks, if you can't understand that, you can't participate in the deep secrets of truth. And this is sometimes a blind spot that gets promulgated in science. And it's not true. Every human being, as Jesus said, has access to this. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So those who are pure in the heart, and that means to develop this inner openness and receptivity to the supreme source itself, almost childlike. In fact, it is childlike. And as Jesus said it, at one point, unless we become as children, we cannot enter the kingdom of God. We want to develop that inner innocence and openness. As Jesus said, seek, knock, and ask. But when we do that, then we need to listen and be receptive and allow God to reveal him, herself to us. So it doesn't have to be hard or difficult or intellectually challenging to be real. And again, we're not dismissing the importance of the intellect, but we are also recognizing, as Plotinus says here, whoops, sorry, what did I just do? I'll be back to it. Excuse me. The soul suffers when the mind resorts to evidence and reason. And that's something that really points to the distinction between the spiritual epistemology. Epistemology means way of knowing, the spiritual way of knowing, and the scientific way of knowing. And both have their place. But if we restrict ourselves merely to evidence and reason, and we don't move into the inner depths of intuition, which has its own kind of evidence and reason, then in fact the soul does suffer. Okay, I think that's enough on all of that. I just want to say that if we go to this mystery of existence, of human existence, and consider, if we contemplate for a moment when everything fails you, because at some point in our lives, the body will fail us, for example. At some point, it's not going to behave like it normally does. the bones and muscles are not going to operate properly. Our heart is not going to beat forever. Our very breath will not work anymore. Of course, I'm speaking at the moment of death in particular. It actually can be entered into before physical death, and this is something we'll be exploring later. But the point I want to make here is that for all of us, at some point, this moment will come. And what will you do then? When all of the habitual ways of being and all of the dharmas of the body, if you will, the practices that we've relied on completely, even down to our heartbeat and our breath, no longer function and no longer work. What else can you do in that moment but simply abandon all these practices, abandon these dharmas, as it's called in the Bhagavad Gita, abandon all these dharmas and take refuge in that supreme, infinite mystery that is the source of life, from which we came, to which we return, which is beyond all form. It's invisible, it's intangible, and yet it's real. It's actually more real than our outer form, because the forms come and go, and our very form of our body will go. And when it goes, what happens to us? Where do we go? And so in that moment, the practice is to take refuge directly into that infinite silent mystery. And that happens at the moment of physical death, but it also happens at the moment of mystical union. And this is part of the practice, is to learn how to withdraw our identification from our body, bones, muscles, heart, and breath, not in any way to dismiss their importance. We love the body, and we are here as a manifested being in our physical body and physical life. But we also need to connect to this infinite, mysterious source of life within each of us by taking refuge in it, by learning how to take refuge in it, by listening, and by merging into that inner oneness with the Supreme. And that is the essence of mysticism across all of the traditions. And the last thing I'll say is, so basically this deep secret of spiritual life then is to do this before we die. We will have to do it when we die. You'll have no choice. Your whole body will fail you at that moment, and you can no longer rely on it. So you will, at that moment, each of us will be forced, if you will, to embrace this mystery, which can seem very threatening and daunting and scary. But it's also something, if we develop a relationship before we die, then we can pass right into that supreme, infinite mystery seamlessly. And so the secret of spiritual life is to practice this before that moment, to die before you die, as Socrates said, as the Prophet Muhammad said. It's said across the traditions, this practice of learning to die before we die. And it entails learning to trust something deeper than we've ever known, and to giving ourselves to this mysterious depth, utterly and totally, trust it absolutely, because it is the source. It's where we came from. It's where we return, and we develop our direct personal relationship with that mystery. And then what happens over time, which is so profound, is that that mystery not only reveals itself, but it becomes us. The mystery takes up residence in you as you. And then your life becomes one of deep peace. Whoops, I'm still, you see, I'm messing with my own software here. I'm so sorry. That mystery basically becomes your experience of yourself. And your life becomes one of deep peace, total trust, flawless action. And it unfolds naturally. This is the essence, very briefly and succinctly outlined, of spiritual life and of the transformation that takes place as we give ourselves deeply to spiritual practice. So I think that's enough for tonight, and we will continue with working with this practice with this understanding as we move back and forth between science and mysticism, between practice and understanding. Thank you.
We're going to move into meditation. Before we do, why don't we stretch our arms up? Just open your heart, stretch your arms back, feel your heart opening. Move the body however you need to move. Wiggle your toes. Move your legs up and down. Whatever feels good. We're going to sit just for about 10 minutes and just be in silence. Then we'll move right into groups. Garrett's working on having groups of 3, and then you'll have some time there. We'll give more instructions then. But for now, we're just going to go right into this meditation. So just inviting you again to close your eyes, have a soft gaze to the floor or the keyboard, and just letting yourself be with all that's been shared this evening, and all that's stirring in your own heart, whatever you came in with. Hopefully that's resting right now and on a back burner, and you've been able to settle in and come into this space together in this time. Just allowing yourself to be with what was shared and what has resonance for you. As you're ready, you can open your eyes and be together in the visual aspect here. We're going to move into our small groups. So our question is for you to respond to is, how are you embracing the unknown at this time? How are you embracing the unknown at this time? And then how are you finding strength in the invisible?
How do you draw spiritual support and strength?
What tools are you using from your own practice, or maybe not? Maybe you're not finding those things. So speak to that as well. Whatever resonates for you in those questions, and then you can take it from there. You ready, Garrett?
Yes.
How do you embrace the unknown, and how do you draw spiritual strength in this time?
So we're going to open it up for just 1 or 2 questions or comments or reflections, because we're nearing our closing hour. We have about 10 minutes. And so anyone that would like to speak, maybe, Garrett, is it easier if they raise their hand, or what works best for you?
Maybe we should just try going for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go for it then. And remember to unmute yourself if you're muted. So.
Well, I just want to jump in and say I'm so appreciative of you two bringing this forward like this. I find myself very moved. I just feel warmed in my whole body just by the experience of the whole evening. You know, like just feeling your passion, Will, the lovely meditations. That it's just and then being able to share that and debrief and have a question. I feel very nourished and grateful for this whole experience.
That's beautiful, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
That's the intention. So I'm glad that the nourishment has been there. And I think one thing we realized that we'll do a little differently next time is probably put you in groups early on and have you do a little check-in with each other so you can connect early and then come back later in the call. So just so you know, next week we'll be doing that as well.
We know the small groups are an important part of this, but it's very good to hear that. Thank you. We appreciate that. And that's something we can really cultivate together in this next month, is developing that warmth and intimacy in this format. Any other questions or comments or reflections?
I want to say the same thing. I was feeling so alone yesterday. I'm brand new in Vancouver. I haven't got connections. I don't have people's texts or phone numbers or anything. And I just went into this deep spiral. And but I called my son, or I texted my son in the matter. The point I'm trying to make is thank you. Thank you so very much, because you've made my home not empty. And I don't know if you quite know what I'm saying, but thank you.
You, Donna. Lovely to have you here, and we look forward to being in community this way for a little bit, and then hopefully we get to meet in person soon.
Thank you.
Welcome, Donna, and welcome to Vancouver, and welcome to the unity of Vancouver community.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Margaret, did I see your hand go up?
Yes, I was just going to share Jim's comment from the group that the pleasure of getting together with 3 people and getting to share had one of the core elements of Shirley Bollett's spiritual journey group. And so that was really satisfying to get to speak and to be heard. Yeah, the whole thing has gone really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you.
You know, this what was brought up already about spiritual nourishment, and that's where we find it in community. Will and I are leading this and moving us through this time, and we are doing that on Sunday service and other ways, and we are in the forefront often. But all of us, I remember Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, said that the next Buddha will be a community. That we get nourishment from each other. We are all the Buddhas. We are all the living together and being leaders together and supports to be able to move through any time, joyous and challenging or whatever. So yeah, this is a really important engagement. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
Anyone else? We've heard from women. Okay,
Shirley.
and then we'll have some men speak.
I think
maybe.
Bria also.
Okay.
I really like the questions, and it was really lovely to hear what people are drawing strength from. Like, that was really rich for me to both to reflect on that myself, but also to hear from others as to how they are finding their grounding in this time was really good. So thank you for that, for the questions.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley. And
Bria?
Yeah, so I've been listening to Abraham. I don't know if you know who Abraham is, for years and years, like 19 years. They're always talking about inner being, you know, inner being, much what you were saying earlier. And about 5 months ago, I finally really got it and started speaking to this inner being within me and asking for advice and, you know, really having that relationship. And I find that has made all the difference in my life. It's amazing how much it's transforming me and how much brilliant wisdom I receive from this. So I guess what came up for me was to use that relationship in dealing with this situation we're in, because I'm a highly claustrophobic person. And so this is triggering me greatly. The being, you know, everything closing down and we might get stuck in our houses, and, you know, it's a huge trigger. So I guess I'm grateful I developed this a few months ago. So now I can maybe use that as I'm in this situation, you know, as this is happening.
That's beautiful, Bria. And I think it's really the invitation, you know, across all the traditions. There's a reason that the mystics and saints went into seclusion. They cloistered themselves. It's not in order to leave the world, but it's to temporarily put the world aside so they could go deeply inward. And that's the invitation that we're really going to be working with this month, and developing a deeper relationship with ourselves and with with the infinite inner mystery and wisdom, as you said. So beautiful. Thank you.
I just want to add that Bria and anyone that has that feeling of claustrophobia or just, you know, it's some time here we're talking. So that's going to be part of the wonder for me, or it is part of the wonder of, okay, maybe a day, 2 days. Okay, I've done 10-day retreats, but this 14 days or whatever is a new area. And so one thing I heard on the Canadian Public Radio today from a doctor who was being interviewed and answering questions is, it's okay. I was really relieved. He said, it's okay to go outside, even for us who have traveled in and need to be, you know, staying inside. He said, you can go outside and take a walk and things, just don't be around other people and stay away. And so take care of yourself there. Find those ways. Do, you know, put on some music and dance, go outside, breathe the air in, just take some breath and just be mindful of our movements around people. That's the main thing right now from everything that I'm gathering.
And I think it was either that doctor or another one who said the vast majority of people getting sick are just getting ordinary colds.
That's right.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
It's not to take, of course, lightly what's happening, but not to get overly paranoid every time you have a sniffle.
So we have just 2 minutes, and I know Carolyn has her hand up, and then I think Marilyn also. So Carolyn, do you have something?
I just wanted to add the, I have, you know, yeah, 2 things. The notion of dying now to prepare for ultimate dying, if you will, to me, that struck a beautiful chord, because I think the connection with the deeper self is actually what that's talking about. And in some way, it just relieved any fear of what's going on right now or what could go on or what will ultimately go on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Carolyn. And in a certain sense, there's a certain way of life that is dying right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if we can embrace that, there will be some new way of life that we are birthing in this process. A new way of spiritual and community life that we're birthing in this process. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Marilyn, do you have something? Nope, you're muted.
Oh, I am.
There you are. There you are.
Now we hear you.
We hear you. Oh, now we don't. Now we don't.
Okay.
I think
Mic thing.
your hand is covering your mic, I think.
My hand is covering my mic.
There you go. You're good now.
Okay, now there we go. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I would put up my hand because I had a cold. I don't have the virus.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Like,
okay.
Okay. Oh my God. What is that? What is that? But I'm really liking this discussion that we're having now of community, and that the next Buddha is a community. I'm just feeling that, no, that's just a thought that has been creeping into my mind. And this, how ironic it is that it is in this time of isolation that we actually find a new way of having community. That's just very intriguing for me, and I'm very grateful for that. And I want to say Wendy, who lives next door to me, but we haven't seen each other because I've got a cold.
That's great.
Beautiful. Thank you for that reflection. And Jennifer, I think we've got to close with you, and you're going to also make an announcement. I don't know if you also have a comment, but both. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I got to move out of the space because we've got 2 computers on the go and it's overlapping. I just wanted to say how awesome it is to connect like this, and the small groups were amazing. And I just wanted to say on behalf of all of us at Unity that if you are feeling disconnected or you're needing support, it's really important that you reach out. And so please, email, because I know we're going to have lots of classes and we're going to be able to connect. But if you are, and Donna, I sent you a little personal chat just saying to reach out, please send us an email at unityvanoffice@gmail.com. And then we want to be able to build the support in that you need specifically. And we want to make sure that you don't feel isolated during this time, or even if you just want to have a phone call or you want to get connected to some information or other groups outside of Unity as well too, just please feel free to reach out. We don't want you feeling alone ever. Okay? Awesome.
That goes for everyone.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so,
Thank you, Will.
thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer, are you putting in the chat how people can leave their love offering if they would like to?
I think Garrett's going to, because I had sent him the info and he's going to copy and paste it into the chat. He's got it right there.
Okay, so before we sign off, there will be a link that you can click on if you'd like to donate. And this is a vital time for all of us to find our resources, both spiritually and monetarily, especially if you're working and your work has been diminished in some ways. I know we're all kind of on some thread there. And Unity Center is also on a thread, not thread, but we still have to keep the lights on in the church and the staff paid and things like that. And so anything that you can contribute in that way tonight would be a real blessing for us. And as we all know, that energy of the money flows through us and gets us flowing, and divine love flowing through us, and everything we give, we receive back. So it's an easy way to do it. And also you can mail in any checks to Unity as well if you don't want to pay online or do it online.
And we thank you. We thank you for your financial donation to keep this course and all of the programs at Unity going. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on Sunday. We'll see you on email. We'll see you next week on Monday, wherever you choose to join in. We're here.
Thank you.
Well, stay tuned, stay connected, and we look forward to continuing to deepen this
Many
cyber
blessings.
community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Blessings. God
Good
bless.
night.
Hey, thank
Take
you.
care this time.
Yeah.